Quilty is brought to you by
APQS, handcrafted quilting machines. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Hovel, when you need to cut it close, choose Hovels. Quiltology, the urban quilt space.
Quilty!
Hey, welcome to Quilty. The quilt that you see behind me right now is one of my latest creations. It is a super simple Sawtooth star quilt, and we are going to focus today's Blocks a Go-Go show on one of those stars. It's a pattern you see over and over in quilts, and we're going to make one of those cute little stars right now. Let's go. The quilt pattern that I use to make this luscious star quilt is something that was designed by Catherine Bell in her book Quilting for Peace, and it's such a bold, simple design. So this is the quilt block that we're making today, this simple sawtooth star. Here we have it in lipstick reds. I like to call all these reds my lipstick reds. So we're going to make this center star block today. Okay, so to save time, we've already cut out the pieces that we need for this quilt. And if you're like, well, how do I know what pieces to cut? Just look at the pattern. It always tells you. Your pattern tells all. So I know from looking at my pattern that I need to cut 2-inch strips. So I need a 2-inch strip of my background fabric, and I need a 2-inch strip of my focus fabric. The background fabric in this case is this sort of grayish or beige, and just to spice things up a little bit, I did pick a print to make the star out of. Your focus fabric is your star. That's what's going to really make the star pop. And in my quilt I used red, but here I'm going to use this print because it's really cool. I really love this fabric. It's Amy Butler fabric, by the way. She's very, very good at what she does, that designer. So we need 2-inch strips. So we cut these 2-inch strips, and once we have those, from those strips we cut out 2-inch by 2-inch squares from our star focus fabric. We cut 2-inch by 2-inch squares out of our background fabric. I believe we need 8 of each. And we need a, let's see, let me put this out first. We need rectangles that are 3.5 inch by 2 inches of the background fabric. And then, obviously not from the strip, but from your focus fabric, you need a 3.5 inch by 3.5 inch square. That's the center of your star. It should make sense when you kind of take a look at this, that this is what's going to make your star happen. This is what it's going to look like. I made one up ahead of time. So that's what the star is going to look like. So that's going to be your center here. These corner pieces are here and here, but we're going to show you how to piece that right now, okay? The first thing you need to do is make your goose units, your flying geese, or your G-unit. I know, I just said G-unit. I know, it's a quilting show and I just said G-unit. I'm going with it. So the first thing you do is when you place your right sides together, one of your 2-inch by 2-inch squares of your star fabric onto your background rectangle, place the right sides together and sew a diagonal seam. It may not make sense now, but hang on. So we're going to sew a diagonal seam from here to here. Okay, let's just take it to the sewing machine and do that. We're not going to do them on every single one because it would take too long, but I'll sew one for you so you can see. Oh, and before you get started sewing, something that I like to do is get just a paper bag or some sort of little sack and a piece of tape, and put the piece of tape on the little sack or bag and tape it to your table. That way you have a little trash bag, because when you're sewing, you have lots of little threads and little pieces of fabric that you want to get rid of. Keep your space tidy. It's a good idea. So I'm going to put my G-unit, my goose unit, at a diagonal and sew straight across from one point to the other. Now some people would like to draw a line to sew on. That's totally fine. This is such a small piece, you don't really need to. My Baby Lock machine is so fabulous. It has a self-cutting mechanism, so I don't need to cut it myself, which is great. So I've sewn one side of my point all the way to the other side. I'm going to clip off my extra thread too. I was taught to be a very tidy little sewer. So now we're going to take it to the ironing board. Let's move the ruler. We don't need that anymore. Put that down here. We're taking it to the ironing board and we're going to set the seam. Any seam you sew, you set. Press it with the iron to just like embed the stitches into the fabric. Okay, so we set the seam. And then we open up our little triangle like so. Fold it back and press it to set it. Maybe give it 1, 2, 3, right? And that is beautiful. Now we don't need this. This is extra. So the back half can be trimmed off, and we can come over here to our little trash bag and just cut it off. We pull it over here. Leave about 1/4 of an inch right here when you trim off that triangle so that you have plenty of seam allowance. And here we have one side of our flying goose. When we do the other side, it's the same process. Put right sides together and take it over to your sewing machine and sew the same thing. I'm going to finish this one and then I'll show you what the finished product looks like. So we go from one side to the other. Beautiful. Cut the thread. Okay, so we've sewn that other side, and I'm going to fold this back just like that after I press it, and we're going to have one side of the star. Okay, so let's take it over here. You always want to press. Do not forget to press. That sets your seam. It's very important. Sewing, making patchwork is cutting, sewing, and pressing. You have to have all 3 parts. Okay, so I'm going to snip. See how nice that little white bag is coming in handy? Okay, now we're gonna fold this back and give it a seam, give the seam a press. And when you're pressing, it's like an up and down thing. It's not ironing. You're not like, because that'll really stretch out your fabric. Okay, let's trim off the back side of my G unit. 50 cent, maybe a guest on Quilty. Did you hear that rumor? Well, yeah, I didn't either, but if you hear it, let me know. So that's one of our star sides. Let's take it over here and show you from above. That's what the points look like on each side, okay? So I am going to show you what they look like when we have them all done. They look like this. Oh, here they are. Okay, I'm gonna clear these away because we've used these. Take these away. We have the center, this side, the bottom, and the other side. It's very good. Ah, but something's missing. That's right, these corner units here, just like this. Like in any block, you're going to start joining rows after you have all these units put together. So the first row that we would sew together is this row. Then we would sew together this row, and then this one, and then join those rows together, and we'll have our block. So let's do this one first. We sew this piece, this corner piece. We put right sides together and sew our 1/4 inch seam right there. Press it and open it. And we sew this corner to that 1/4 inch seam right there and press and open. Now, and then of course the same thing will happen here. We fold these in, right sides together. You're looking at the wrong side, and sew them together. And then we do the same thing for this last row. Now, I've done this already, and I want to show you that when you take your pieces after you've sewn them to the ironing board and press them, I have a tip for you that's a very important thing. I want you to remember this, and I want you to do it whenever you make a block. We've sewn our, let's say it's our bottom star points. We've sewn the corner pieces to our star points here and here, right? You come over and you set the seam. From there, open them out and press them out so that the seam is going away from the block underneath, right? Open it like a little window, okay? Same thing with this side. So that your seam underneath is going out, okay? Now for your next row, do the opposite. So it's the center of your star, right? You press, set your seams. You've sewn either side to the center of your star. Turn it over so that when you press your seams, the center is going in. Because when you join your rows, you want those seams to lock in the back. And it doesn't really matter if you go out, in, or in, out. Like as long as one row's going in and the next one's going out, you're gonna have really nice, accurate patchwork. We'll take it back over here. And when we start joining our rows because that's where we're at. We're ready to join rows. We're going to flip this right sides together and join this row to that row. And what happens is you get this beautiful locked seam right there. Do you see that? I'm going to pin it so you can see it even better and so you know what I'm talking about. If you have seams that are pressed the same way, it's going to create a big bump under your sewing machine. As you're sewing, your needle and your press-a-fret has to get over that big hump, and it's really hard on your sewing machine. It makes for lumpy patchwork, and it's just harder to sew. So when you're sewing a block together and you're joining rows, try your very best to have your seams going in opposite directions, okay, as you press them. And it takes a little, takes a little forethought, takes a little brain power, but you can do it, and if you do it, you will be very happy. You can see here, after you've pinned, you're just going to sew this 1/4 inch seam, press it, and open it out. And you're going to do the same thing on this side. And because you've pressed the way you've pressed, those seams are going to lock in as well. You sew that at your machine, and what you end up with after you press is a beautiful, simple sawtooth star block in that gorgeous fabric. I really like it in blue. So that's the block for Blocks A Go-Go today, this super simple sawtooth star. Take it and run with it. Do whatever you like with it. And for more information on Quilty, the pattern, supplies that you see on the show, the sewing machine that we use, go to heyquilty.com or visit qnntv.com and click on Quilty. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Quilty is brought to you by APQS, handcrafted quilting machines. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Hovel, when you need to cut it close, choose Hovels. Quiltology, the urban quilt space.